for most people, they have a little bit of an idea, if you really sat them down, what their worldview is. And that's the kind of tip of the iceberg. But if you look beneath the waterline, as one knows with an iceberg, the main mass of ice is below the water. There is this massive iceberg which exists that we're not even aware of, that informs how we behave, how we turn up, how we unfurl our life in the public setting.
I spent a lot of my formative years as a child in the Congo in Africa, so I kind of grew up among the poor and had concern for them. But then living in Pakistan and living alongside the very poor and like having cotton grown in our fields and seeing the people picking the cotton and knowing that they weren't getting paid hardly anything for that, it kind of brought it all home. And it's easy to live in a kind of bubble in this society and think that the rest of the world is different somehow or so far away, but actually it's very near and the people are very similar to us. And just kind of a realisation that we share this planet.
There's a worldview about production and development. But our worldview of development, I mean the majority of our society, for example here in Europe or in big cities. This worldview of development is not necessarily the view of development other people have. And it's not what makes them happy. Many decisions in the world are taken from one majority world view and not giving importance to other world views. And because of that, many people suffer.
The change in my thinking in terms of the environment and taking the creation seriously was triggered by something quite bizarre. We were on holiday as a couple, my wife and I, on the Isles of Scilly, just off Cornwall. And we had 2 weeks self-catering. At the end of that, we'd got an awful lot of rubbish. And there was no waste collection on the island. And somebody told us that all we had to do was walk to one end of the island and we'd see what to do with the rubbish. And so, to cut a long story short, that's what I did. And as I was about to throw my rubbish off this cliff onto a beach that was now the island rubbish tip, I had a strong sense, completely unexpectedly, of God saying, "How do you think I feel about what you're doing to my world?"
So how has my worldview changed? I think specifically relating to human trafficking. You know, I was really naive 10 years ago and didn't think something like that existed, that people were really exploited in that way. And so that's changed. And my worldview, I think the longer that I walk in the way of Jesus, the more I think we have to be radical. We have to step outside of the box. We've got to go for it.
Moving on to a working class estate has been a real eye-opener and has made me see suffering and poverty in an entirely different way. So the estate I'm on is in the bottom 2% of deprivation, which is something that I didn't even believe existed. I've seen poverty that is painful to see. I now find I can't spend money. I find that really difficult. So I can buy something that I need, I can buy a loaf of bread, I can buy a new pair of shoes, but what I can't do is go and buy a new TV or buy a laptop, because I start to think about it and then think, well, actually that money could be spent somewhere else. And so I've had to come head on with my understanding of what it means to have money and have wealth and how you use that and how you use your time and what time's your own.
I'm a consumer, you're a consumer, we're all consumers. I mean, that's the reality of the world in which we live. I think for me, where my worldview has changed on consumerism is the more that I slow down and I think about what I'm consuming, the more I can make better decisions. And that's, maybe it's age, but you know, I've just thought actually that's something I value more now. It's the way I think about the world has changed so much from 5 years ago or 10 years ago when I thoughtlessly consumed, because that's what advertisers and marketers want us to do. you need this, you want this, buy it now, have it now.
It's useful to have a view on other people's understanding, because we do have tinted glasses we see the world through. And I think for me it's important to understand about African worldview and an Islamic worldview and a woman in an Islamic worldview, because they're the worldviews I'm dealing with. Just because I've been brought up with mine doesn't mean everything I think is absolutely correct.
There is a need for us in and among the people of God today to really critique, offer places where we can critique our worldview beyond just the tip of the iceberg.